Was I wrong to expose my sister-in-law's hypocrisy after she belittled my university degree at family dinner? You know that moment when someone insults you so politely that you almost wonder if you imagined it? That was my sister-in-law last night, questioning whether my campus was the actual university with such casual sweetness that my husband thinks I overreacted. But after years of small comments and subtle judgments from his family, something in me finally snapped. I asked her what she was doing with her prestigious degree, knowing full well she stays home with her kids, and the look on her face told me I had crossed into territory I could never come back from. Now I am lying awake wondering if defending my accomplishments was worth the price I'm about to pay. So let's rewind. The drive to my in-laws' house last night should have been peaceful. My daughter was dozing in her car seat, my husband was humming along to the radio, and I was mentally preparing myself for what I thought would be just another routine family dinner. I had no idea that by the end of the evening, I would be questioning everything I said, wondering if I had become the villain in a story that started with someone else's subtle jab. We arrived right on time, as we always do. My mother-in-law greeted us at the door with her usual warmth, immediately reaching for my daughter and cooing over how much she had grown since last week. Yes, last week. We do this every week. It is our routine, our obligation, our penance for being part of this family. My husband loves these dinners. He grew up with them. For me, they are still something I am learning to navigate, even after 5 years of marriage. My sister-in-law and her husband were already there, their 3 children running around the living room like tiny tornadoes. She gave me a polite smile when we walked in, the kind that does not quite reach the eyes but is acceptable enough in family settings. We have never been close. I have always felt like there was an invisible wall between us, something unspoken that keeps our relationship at arm's length. She was always cordial, always appropriate, but never warm. I accepted this. Not everyone has to be best friends with their in-laws. Dinner started normally enough. We talked about the usual things: work, the kids, weekend plans, the weather. My father-in-law told the same joke he tells every month about his golf game. Everyone laughed politely. My daughter made a mess with her mashed potatoes, and I cleaned it up while my mother-in-law insisted she was fine, that kids should be allowed to explore their food. It was all perfectly predictable. Then the conversation shifted. My mother-in-law mentioned that one of their cousins had a son who had just been accepted into university. Everyone congratulated the achievement, discussing which school he had chosen and what program he would be studying. The conversation naturally evolved into a discussion about the importance of higher education, about how the right university could open doors, about networking and opportunities. This was when I made my first mistake. I contributed to the conversation. I mentioned how my first real job as a business analyst had come directly from a connection I made at university. My interviewer had also attended the University of Toronto, and we had bonded over shared experiences during my interview. That connection, that common ground, had helped me stand out among other candidates. It was a perfect example of how networking at a good school could lead to real opportunities. I should have seen it coming. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I had let my guard down too much. My sister-in-law, who had been quietly listening while cutting her chicken into precise little pieces, looked up and said with what seemed like genuine curiosity, "University of Toronto, Mississauga, right? So not the actual one?" The table went quiet for just a second. Not an obvious, dramatic silence, but one of those micro pauses where everyone suddenly becomes very interested in their plates. My husband, bless him, immediately jumped in with a polite correction, explaining that all University of Toronto campuses grant the same degree, that they are all part of the same institution, that there is no hierarchy despite what some people might think. She just shrugged. One shoulder, barely perceptible, paired with a little smile that said she had made her point and was not particularly interested in being corrected. Something hot and sharp twisted in my chest. It was not quite anger yet, but it was close. It was the feeling of being diminished, of having your accomplishments quietly downgraded in front of people whose opinions matter to you. I have felt it before. I felt it when I first started dating my husband, and his family would make subtle comments about my background. I felt it at my wedding when his aunt asked if my family was comfortable with such an expensive venue. I felt it every time someone in this family made me feel like I was not quite good enough, not quite the right fit. But I always smiled. I always let it go. I always took the high road. Not last night. I turned to her with what I hoped was a pleasant expression and asked where she had gone to university. I knew the answer, of course. She had mentioned it before, probably multiple times, the way people do when their identity is wrapped up in credentials earned a decade ago. University of Toronto, she said. And then, just to make absolutely sure I understood the distinction, she added, St. George campus, the main campus, the real one, as she had so helpfully pointed out moments earlier. This was my second mistake, though I am still not entirely convinced it was a mistake at all. I asked her what she was doing with her degree. I knew what she was doing. Everyone at that table knew what she was doing. She is a stay-at-home mother. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that choice. It is a valid, important, challenging job that deserves respect. But in that moment, with her subtle dismissal of my education still hanging in the air, with years of small comments and quiet judgments building up inside me, I asked the question anyway. Her face changed. The polite mask slipped just slightly, enough for me to see the flash of hurt and anger underneath. She straightened in her chair and said, with careful dignity, that she had chosen to be a stay-at-home mother, that raising raising her children was the most important work she could be doing. Then she stopped talking to me completely. For the rest of the dinner, she directed all her comments to others at the table, asked her husband to pass things instead of asking me directly, even though I was closer. She created a bubble of exclusion around me without ever being overtly rude. It was masterful, really. My husband drove home in silence. Our daughter had fallen asleep again, oblivious to the tension filling the car. I stared out the window, replaying the conversation in my head, trying to figure out if I had been as out of line as his silence suggested. When we got home and put our daughter to bed, he finally spoke. He said I had crossed a line, that her comment had been tactless, sure, but not malicious, that she was probably just trying to make conversation, maybe even trying to relate to me by discussing our shared alma mater, that my response had been pointed and hurtful, designed to make her feel bad about her life choices. I pushed back. I said her question had been rude, that it had been dismissive of my accomplishments, that the premise was fundamentally wrong. The University of Toronto Mississauga campus is not a lesser institution. Students there work just as hard, learn from the same caliber of professors, earn the same degree. The geographic location of where you sat in lectures does not determine your intelligence or your worth. He said I was probably right about that, but that did not excuse what I had said to her. I argued that intention mattered. Her intention had been to put me in my place, to remind me that her credentials were somehow superior to mine. My response had been defensive, yes, but justified. He disagreed. He said that even if her comment was meant to be dismissive, it was subtle enough that I could have let it go, could have taken the high road as I usually do. By responding the way I did, I had escalated the situation and created unnecessary drama. We went to bed without really resolving anything, lying on opposite sides of the mattress with an ocean of unspoken resentment between us. This morning he told me she had texted him. She said I was completely out of line, that she could not believe I would attack her life choices like that she had simply been asking an innocent question about my education, and I had turned it into something ugly. My husband responded to her, trying to smooth things over. He told her it was all a misunderstanding, that tensions had been high, that everyone should just let it go and move forward. He has always been the peacekeeper, the mediator, the one who tries to make sure everyone gets along. But I am not ready to let it go. Because here is what I keep coming back to. Why is my response considered crossing a line when her initial comment is written off as tactless, but harmless? Why am I expected to absorb subtle insults with grace, while any pushback from me is seen as aggressive and inappropriate? I have been thinking about this all day. I have replayed that moment over and over, examining it from every angle, trying to be honest with myself about my motivations and whether I genuinely went too far. Was I trying to hurt her? Maybe. In that moment, with her dismissive shrug still fresh in my mind, did I want her to feel some of what I was feeling? Probably. But I also genuinely wanted an answer. I wanted to know how someone who places so much value on attending the right campus of a university was using that expensive education. I wanted to know if the prestige she was so proud of had translated into anything tangible, or if we were really just talking about bragging rights from over a decade ago. My husband thinks her question was innocent, but I cannot accept that. People who attended the St. George campus of University of Toronto know exactly what they are implying when they make that distinction. It is not about geography. It is about hierarchy. It is about maintaining a sense of superiority over people who had the audacity to get the same degree from a different location. I have met dozens of people like this over the years. People who ask where you went to school and then immediately judge you based on the answer. People who assign value to human beings based on admission statistics and campus reputations. People who think that where you studied between the ages of 18 and 22 somehow defines your entire worth as a person. I thought I had left all that behind when I graduated and built a successful career. I thought that proving myself professionally would be enough, that my accomplishments would speak for themselves. But apparently, I will always be the girl who went to the Mississauga campus, and people like my sister-in-law will always feel entitled to point that out. The more I think about it, the angrier I get. Not just at her, but at this whole system of subtle put-downs and unspoken hierarchies. I am angry at myself for caring, for letting her comment get under my skin, for responding in a way that makes me look like the villain. I am angry at my husband for not being more firmly on my side, for prioritizing family peace over supporting his wife. I am angry at the fact that I am even questioning myself right now, that I am wondering if I owe her an apology when she has never apologized for any of the small ways she has made me feel less than over the years. But I am also wondering if I really did go too far. If in my desire to defend myself, I struck out in a way that was genuinely hurtful and unnecessary. There's a difference between standing up for yourself and being cruel, and I am honestly not sure which side of that line I fell on. Being a stay-at-home mother is hard work. It requires sacrifice and dedication. It is a legitimate choice that deserves respect. By questioning what she was doing with her degree, was I implying that her choice was somehow invalid? That education is only worthwhile if it leads to a traditional career? That raising children is not a valuable use of time and talent? I do not believe any of those things. But in that moment, that is what my words suggested. So now I am stuck. I am stuck between feeling justified in my response and feeling guilty about it. I am stuck between wanting to apologize and wanting her to apologize first. I am stuck between maintaining my pride and preserving preserving family peace. I am stuck between my husband's perspective and my own. What I do know is this: I am tired of being the one who always has to be the bigger person. I am tired of absorbing subtle insults with a smile. I am tired of being told that my feelings of being disrespected are less important than everyone else's comfort. I am tired of family dynamics that require me to minimize myself so that others can feel superior. But I am also aware that relationships require compromise, that families are messy and imperfect, that holding on to grudges and keeping score is exhausting and ultimately pointless, that my daughter will grow up watching how I handle conflicts, and I want to model grace and maturity, not pettiness and vindictiveness. So I am here, turning this situation over in my mind, trying to figure out the right path forward. Do I apologize for the hurt I caused, even though I am still hurt myself? Do I demand an apology from her first, knowing that will probably never happen? Do I try to explain myself to make her understand why her comment bothered me so much? Do I just let it all blow over and go back to polite distance at family dinners? My husband wants me to let it go. He says that is the mature thing to do, the thing that will cause the least amount of ongoing tension. But letting it go feels like losing, like admitting that her behavior was acceptable and mine was not. Maybe we were both wrong. Maybe this is one of those situations where everyone could have handled things better, where pride and hurt feelings escalated something that should have remained a minor moment of awkwardness. Maybe I am overthinking this entire thing, assigning malicious intent where there was only thoughtlessness. Or maybe I am finally seeing clearly, finally acknowledging patterns that have been there all along, finally refusing to pretend that subtle cruelty is somehow more acceptable than honest confrontation. I honestly do not know anymore. What I do know is that I will see her again next week at another family dinner. We will both smile politely. We will probably avoid direct conversation. My husband will try to keep things light. My daughter will play with her children, oblivious to the tension between the adults. And I will wonder, as I have wondered before and will wonder again, what it costs to be part of a family where keeping the peace always seems to require me to make myself smaller.